Connecticut has banned the private sale of firearms, and it could happen to the rest of the country. But before we talk about this topic, got a super secret giveaway. It's happening right now. It's absolutely free, but it ends really soon. I can't even tell you what it is. Go to the link in the description down below, click on it, and you'll see what you could win. I'm here with noted criminal defense attorney and former state prosecutor Tom Grieve. And Tom, you've seen the initial reports, very, very new, coming out of Connecticut, that the Connecticut State Police and the government in Connecticut has found a way around the NICS checks and decided they're going to stop the private sale of firearms. So now all firearms sales have to go through an FFL in Connecticut because what the Biden administration has now said, you can't use the federal NICS check. You got to use your own state NICS check, and it's getting really kind of weird.
It's the East Coast being the East Coast, man.
Absolutely.
I don't really know what to tell you.
Yeah.
I mean, right. So, I mean, the gist to it is exactly what you just said, which is, look, all firearms have to basically go through an FFL, and the FFL needs to log them in their bound book, which is something that all FFLs have to do. When a firearm comes in, when it goes out, it gets logged into the book, logged out of the book when it leaves the store, right? And what Connecticut wants the FFLs to do, and again, FFLs, federal firearms licensed dealers, we're talking retailers, we're talking gun stores. That's what we're talking about here. What FFLs have to do is they have to have a specific code designation if something is going to be a private sale. So if I want to sell a firearm to you in Connecticut, you and I have to go to a gun store, basically. They have to log in your yeet cannon as a high point operator.
I would never sell my yeet cannon. I just want you to know that.
That's fair. That's fair. Now available in 10-round models, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, so that they would be legal in those states.
So you have to log in the yeet cannon to the book, into the bound book. So that's something that the FFL would do. You would not do. And then they would conduct a background check on me as someone trying to desperately purchase your yeet cannon so I can yeet. And then once I get that, I'm approved for transfer. I don't know if there's waiting periods or anything like that in Connecticut, but subject to all those sorts of extras, we'll call them, the unconstitutional extras, then I'm good to go. But if that purchase would not be going through the NICS background check system. So if I were to go to the store to purchase my yeet cannon from them, that would be going through the NICS background check, right? So that's the federal background check system. However, since I'm just privately purchasing that from you so that you can take that money and do whatever it is that you want to do with it, presumably invest in some other high point operator sort of stuff, then look, it's going to have to go through the Connecticut background check system.
Right, and you can almost guarantee that this is going to add extra cost to your firearms transaction. These firearms dealers are not going to be doing this for nothing. And it looks to me like the federal government is trying to find a way with the help of some of the, let's call them bluer states, to circumvent this idea to get to universal background checks on the sale of firearms. And we know that universal background checks do not reduce crime, because if somebody in Connecticut still wants to sell a gun, if Bob on the street has a firearm and he wants to sell it to Joe on the street and both of them are intent on committing a crime, they make that transaction, they sell the gun, he gives them, $500 for his yeet cannon, and they go off in different directions to commit crime. Nobody knows that they have done that.
Right.
Unless, of course, now we build this database of gun ownership, gun registration. See, universal background checks lead to universal registration. And then the only way they know you still have the guns is universal inspection of your guns at some point. And when does it all stop? And I can see this. I hate to use the term slippery slope. That's overused, but universal background checks are the first step to registration, which is the first step to confiscation, because they have to know where all the guns are. And the only guns that they're going to know are law-abiding citizens' guns. The bad guys aren't going to register.
Right, which of course, just like New Mexico, gun laws are for the good guys.
Right.
And criminal laws like homicide, robbery, burglary, that's the stuff for the bad guys, right? So all these gun laws, that's just affecting you and I.
Yeah.
But it's senseless stuff that isn't going to really move the needle, I think, as far as crime goes, in any meaningful way, at least. And it's just something that's going to wind up getting the good guys. There's going to be people who will understandably choose not to comply, and they're just going right down that road. And Kevin, you said you don't want to use the S term, slippery slope, right? I don't think that's a slippery slope. Now, I realize logical fallacy, yada, 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 right? I mean, we both sat through those classes.
Yeah.
So we will, for the keyboard warriors out there, we understand the principles of play here. But it's one thing when it's a logical fallacy. It's another thing when it's history. And registration, like every single mass roundup of firearms in every other country that's been out there in history, they have to start with who has the firearms.
Right.
And depending upon the bureaucratic ineptitudes of that society, maybe they skip registration and go directly to confiscation. If it's an organized society, maybe they go through registration first and then lead to the confiscation. So a lot of it, the seams wander, but the story is basically the same.
Yeah, absolutely. And this specifically what's happening in Connecticut is something we're all going to have to keep our eye on and watch and see if other states try to apply this same model. I shudder to think what will happen if this starts getting some traction and expanding to other states where they just get this idea that, hey, now we know how to do this. And honestly, they are circumventing the lawmaking process with the rules-making process. And it's the state special firearms unit or whatever it is there in Connecticut just saying, this is a new rule now. The legislature didn't even make that as a law. It's just a new rule from the state police.
And this just goes back to the vigilance of what we need to see out there from the legal activist groups, right? Like Gun Owners of America, Firearms Policy Coalition, and others, Second Amendment Foundation, Wisconsin Institute for Law and Liberty here in Wisconsin. Of these groups, every single time the government does this somewhere, there needs to be a lawsuit.
Yeah.
Period.
And hopefully that will help.
So that will help.
Slow things down. Always appreciate your insight, Tom. Thank you very much. And we're just going to keep watching this one.
Thanks, Kevin.
Before you go, you just missed one of our best videos that got over 500,000 views. Click right here to watch it now.